Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
You are listening to the Reformed Thinking Edition.
That's right.
And today we are opening a file that, well, quite frankly, it challenged me more than almost anything we have looked at recently.
Oh, without a doubt. It is heavy.
It's not the kind of history that makes you feel warm and fuzzy about your own spiritual discipline.
No, definitely not.
We are looking at a historical figure who embodies a very specific, very biblical paradox. The idea that God's strength is made perfect in weakness.
It is a concept we say we believe, right?
Sure.
I mean, it is on the coffee mugs. It is on the wall art.
Yeah, your bookstores are full of it.
Right. But in practice, we usually prefer strength made perfect in, well, strength.
Or success.
Success, health, visible growth.
Yeah.
We want the victory part of the Christian life without the crushing defeat that often precedes it.
Yeah.
But the subject of our discussion today had almost none of those things, at least not by the metrics of the world.
We are talking about David Brainerd.
Yes.
Now, for those of you in our audience who know church history, the name is iconic.
Absolutely legendary.
But if you strip away the legend and just look at the raw resume,
Just the facts.
right, without the spiritual lens, it reads like a tragedy.
It really does.
I mean, he died at 29.
So young.
He only spent 4 years as a missionary. He battled severe, crushing depression his entire life. And this is the kicker. He was kicked out of college in disgrace.
And yet, this man, this supposed failure by the standards of the 18th century, and certainly by the efficiency metrics of our modern world.
Oh, today he wouldn't even get a church planting residency.
Not a chance.
Yeah.
But he became the primary catalyst for the modern missionary movement.
Yeah, that's wild.
You physically cannot tell the story of William Carey or Henry Martyn or Jim Elliot without starting with David Brainerd.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We are not just recounting a biography for you today.
No, we need to understand the mechanics of this.
Right, how God used this specific man. What was it about his misery and his mission, to borrow a phrase from John Piper in our source material, that sparked such a fire?
We are drawing heavily from Piper's work, The Hidden Smile of God,
Along with Brainerd's own journals.
and Jonathan Edwards' commentary on his life.
Right, so to really get this, we have to anchor him in time.
That set the stage.
David Brainerd was born on April 20th, 1718, in Haddam, Connecticut.
And just to triangulate that for you, that same year, 1718, John Wesley and Jonathan Edwards turned 14.
Benjamin Franklin was 12,
So he is part of that powerhouse generation.
but he is on the tail end of it.
Correct. He is right on the cusp of the Great Awakening.
The Great Awakening is the storm gathering just over the horizon.
Brainerd is going to live through those massive tectonic shifts of revival in the 1730s and 40s.
But while the world was getting ready for revival, his personal world was just falling apart.
It was. Let's look at that start. Section 1 of our notes is titled, A Heritage of Frailty and Sorrow.
Which honestly feels like an understatement.
It does.
His father, Hezekiah Brainerd, was a Connecticut legislator. And the sources describe him as a rigorous Puritan.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean in a domestic context?
It means high standards, strict views on authority, and intense personal holiness.
Very intense.
We have records of Hezekiah fasting for days just to promote the spiritual welfare of his family.
Wow.
He was a man who took the Westminster Catechism seriously, not just as a theological document, but as a total lifestyle.
But he died when David was only 9 years old.
Yeah, 9.
Piper makes a really specific point in the text about that age.
He does.
He suggests that, judging by his own experience raising sons, 9 might be the absolute hardest age to lose a father.
It makes sense. You are old enough to feel the weight of the loss, to understand the permanence of death.
But you are too young to have the emotional tools to stabilize yourself.
It is a totally destabilizing event. You just lose your bearing.
But the tragedy did not stop there.
Yeah.
David was the 6th child. His mother, Dorothy, was left with a house full of kids,
And then, 5 years later,
just as David was turning 14.
another critical developmental window.
His mother died as well.
So by 14, he is an orphan.
He moves in with his sister, Jerusha.
And this is where we start to see that his struggles were not just circumstantial.
Right, it wasn't just grief over losing his parents, though that was massive.
There was something internal, something biological going on.
The source material refers to it as a constitutional weakness.
Today, we might call it a genetic predisposition.
Right.
There was a strain of what they called morbid depression running through the entire Brainerd line.
It is startling when you look at the family statistics.
His brother Nehemiah died at 32.
His brother Israel died at 23.
His sister Jerusha, who was like a second mother to him, died at 34.
And David, as we said, died at 29.
There is a quote here from a descendant of the family, writing much later in 1865.
What did he say?
He wrote, "In the whole Brainerd family, for 200 years, there has been a tendency to a morbid depression, akin to hypochondria."
Now, we need to clarify that term, don't we?
Yes.
Because hypochondria means something entirely different to us today.
Right. Today, you think of a hypochondriac as someone who thinks they are sick when they are actually fine.
WebMD syndrome.
Well, yes, spot on. But in the 19th century sense, it meant a black dejection,
The gloom.
a fixation on one's own misery and internal state. Brainerd did not just suffer because bad things happened to him.
He fought a battle with his own biology and temperament right from his youth.
He described himself in his own diary as inclined rather to melancholy.
That is such a vital piece of context for you, the listener. I think sometimes we read these spiritual biographies and assume these men were made of steel.
That their faith made them immune to mental anguish.
But Brainerd was incredibly fragile. He was fighting his own mind long before he ever fought a spiritual battle.
And that fragility played directly into his conversion struggle, which is the next major beat in his life.
Because for a long time, Brainerd was religious.
Obsessively so.
But he was not a Christian.
No, he calls it careful and serious religion.
He admitted later he had no true grace at that time.
This is the classic struggle of the legalist.
Doing the duties, but the heart is completely cold.
But it goes even deeper than just duty. He was actually fighting against Reformed doctrine itself.
He fought against the idea of original sin.
He fought against God's sovereignty.
He hated the idea that he could not earn his standing before God.
He wanted to be the architect of his own salvation.
There is this vivid image he uses to describe his prayers during this time.
The water analogy.
Yes, he realized his prayers were like paddling with my hands in the water.
It is a brilliant analogy when you really picture it.
Think about it. When you paddle with your hands, you are working so hard.
You are splashing, you are making noise, you are exhausted.
You are not really going anywhere.
And more importantly, you are doing it for yourself. He realized he was not praying for God's glory.
He was praying for his own safety.
He was trying to manipulate God into saving him.
He says, I never once intended his honor and glory. I had never once acted for God in all my devotions.
That is a terrifying realization for a highly religious person to have.
To realize all your supposed goodness is just self-preservation wearing a mask.
It is the realization of total depravity.
Yes, as outlined in the Westminster Confession.
He saw that his absolute best works were stained with sin because the root motive was self, not God.
He was at the end of his rope.
But that is precisely where God meets him. We come to July 12th, 1739.
The turning point. He is 21 years old.
It is a Sunday evening.
Half an hour before sunset.
He is walking in a dark, thick grove.
And this is where the light breaks in.
He describes it as unspeakable glory.
Now, we need to be very specific here because people get confused about religious experiences.
They do. They assume mysticism.
Right. He says explicitly it was not a vision.
He did not see a bearded man in the sky or a physical beam of light.
He saw the divine glory and splendor of God's character.
It was an intellectual and spiritual apprehension of who God actually is.
I love how he describes this shift in his focus.
He says he was swallowed up in God's excellency.
He stopped worrying about his own salvation.
He writes, I had no thought, as I remember at first, about my own salvation or scarce that there was such a creature as I.
That is the mark of true regeneration.
He went from being obsessed with his own safety to being completely obsessed with God's beauty.
He entered a new world, as he put it.
His desire was now to exalt God as king, regardless of what happened to David Brainerd.
So he is converted.
He has this new heart.
2 months later, he enters Yale College to prepare for the ministry.
And if this were a typical movie script, you would think, okay, now the hero's race begins.
He is going to be a top theologian, graduate with honors, and change the world.
And he actually was the top scholar.
He was at the head of his class academically.
But the timing of his arrival at Yale is explosive.
He arrives in 1739 to 1740.
This is the absolute height of the Great Awakening.
We really have to set the scene on campus for you because it is hard for us to imagine a university being a spiritual battleground in this specific way today.
You had the new lights,
the students who were pro-revival,
very zealous, following George Whitefield.
and you had the old lights.
The faculty and trustees who were deeply suspicious of all this emotional enthusiasm.
It was a complete powder keg.
Whitefield had come through and stirred everyone up,
Then you had Gilbert Tennant preaching fiery sermons about unconverted ministers.
basically telling people that if their pastor was not visibly on fire for the Lord, he might be leading them straight to hell.
The students started looking at their tutors and wondering, does this guy actually know the Lord?
Or is he just a dusty, dead academic?
The trustees were terrified of losing control.
They passed a strict new rule.
They said that if any student called a faculty member carnal or unconverted, they could be expelled.
A zero-tolerance policy for spiritual criticism.
And Brainerd, in his youthful zeal.
And let's be honest, perhaps a bit of spiritual arrogance.
Right. He walked right into it.
It is the famous chair comment.
He is in a private conversation with 2 or 3 friends in a hall.
He is not preaching a public sermon.
He is talking about one of the tutors, Chauncey Whittlesey, who had just finished praying.
And Brainerd says he has no more grace than a chair.
Which, to be fair, is a devastating insult.
He is saying the man is an inanimate object spiritually.
He also made a comment wondering why the rector did not drop down dead for finding zealous students.
Someone overheard the chair comment, snitched to the faculty, and the trustees made an example of him.
He was summarily expelled.
This was not just a slap on the wrist.
It wasn't go home for a semester and think about what you did.
This destroyed his entire life plan.
In Connecticut at that time, you could not be a minister without a degree from Yale, Harvard, or a European university.
He was effectively blacklisted from his calling.
He tried so hard to get back in.
He apologized repeatedly.
Jonathan Edwards even tried to intervene on his behalf.
But the trustees would not budge.
Piper calls this the great lesson.
One careless word, 8 wrong words. He has no more grace than a chair.
And it ruined his career path.
But this is where the reformed thinking aspect really shines for us.
Because we look at that and say, what a massive waste of potential.
But the expert analysis in our source material suggests this was a providence in disguise.
Without a doubt. Think about it.
If Brainerd had stayed at Yale, he would have graduated, taken a nice, quiet pastorate in a comfortable New England town.
He probably would have dealt with his depression in private, preached solid sermons, and died completely unknown.
The expulsion forced him into the wilderness.
It cut off the path to comfort and left only the path to the mission field.
And there is a historical twist here that is just staggering.
Brainerd's expulsion actually led to the founding of 2 major universities.
It is a supreme irony.
Jonathan Dickinson and Aaron Burr.
The father of the famous Aaron Burr.
Right. They were so upset by how Yale treated Brainerd that it catalyzed them to start the College of New Jersey.
Which we know today as Princeton.
So Brainerd was technically the very first student of Princeton.
In a spiritual and historical sense, yes. The whole institution was basically formed because he needed a place that wouldn't reject him, though he never formally enrolled before heading to the mission field.
And it did not stop there.
No, Eleazar Wheelock was inspired by Brainerd's journals later on.
And he started a school for Indians, which eventually became Dartmouth College.
So the student expelled for enthusiasm inspired the founding of 2 Ivy League schools.
God really does move in mysterious ways.
He does.
But let's follow Brainerd into that wilderness, because it was not a romantic adventure.
Not at all. He was assigned to the Conomeque Indians near Stockbridge, Massachusetts.
And later to the Forks of the Delaware in Pennsylvania.
The conditions were absolutely brutal.
We are talking about the 1740s on the frontier.
He is living in a hut he built himself.
He describes his diet as hasty pudding and boiled corn.
He is sleeping on a bundle of straw.
And remember, he is sick.
He has tuberculosis.
Or consumption, as they called it back then.
The descriptions in the sources are incredibly graphic.
He talks about riding through the rain and spitting blood.
There is a diary entry where he says he was in the extremity of pain that almost bereaved him of his reason.
He would be in his hut, and the smoke from the fire would be so thick he could not breathe.
So he would have to go outside into the freezing cold just to get air.
Which then made his fever even worse.
It sounds like an absolute nightmare.
But the sources highlight that the physical suffering was actually secondary to the mental and spiritual suffering.
He was incredibly lonely.
That loneliness is palpable when you read his writings.
He talks about hearing the profane talk of strangers or languages he did not understand.
And just aching for a soul companion.
He desperately wanted someone to talk to about the things of God, and there was no one.
And then there was the darkness.
We talked about his depression earlier, but the source material makes a clear distinction between his physical melancholy and spiritual desertion.
This is a nuance we often miss today.
Brainerd knew he was physically prone to depression.
But he also experienced times where he felt God had totally withdrawn his presence.
There is a terrifying entry where he describes feeling like a criminal at the bar.
I have that quote right here. He says he felt like a criminal waiting for a sentence.
But the scary part is his reaction.
Right. He did not care.
He says the fear of hell was taken away and the desire for heaven was gone.
He felt wholly destitute of any happiness.
That is the numbness of deep clinical depression.
It is not just sadness.
It is the complete flattening of affect.
He could not feel love for God.
He could not feel fear of judgment.
He just existed in this awful void.
He said he felt unfit to exist.
It really contradicts the highly curated version of Christianity we see today, where holy people are always happy and feeling blessed.
Brainerd was a giant of the faith, and yet he spent days feeling like he was already dead.
And that is why his journals have been such a massive comfort to millions of believers.
Because if David Brainerd, the man who prayed for hours in the snow, could feel that way,
then maybe my darkness does not mean I am not saved.
it proves that faith exists independent of our fluctuating feelings.
However, our source material does point out a flaw in Brainerd's outlook.
Or at least a significant blind spot compared to someone like Jonathan Edwards.
This is a fascinating contrast.
Jonathan Edwards saw the glory of God in absolutely everything.
He would look at a thunderstorm or a blue sky or a flower, and he would see a direct revelation of God's majesty.
Nature was a theater of God's glory for Edwards.
But for Brainerd,
Brainerd almost never mentions the beauty of nature.
to him it was a howling wilderness.
He was a bleak enemy.
He never writes about a sunset or a majestic landscape in his journals.
Piper suggests this was a costly blind spot for him.
He missed God's natural antidote to depression.
General revelation, the beauty of the created order.
Charles Spurgeon had a great take on this.
And Spurgeon struggled with massive depression, too.
He said that a mouthful of sea air or a stiff walk in the wind does not give you saving grace,
But it gives you oxygen.
which is the next best thing.
That is such a practical theology.
It is. Brainerd's illness certainly made it harder to appreciate nature. I mean, it is hard to enjoy a nice view when you are coughing up blood.
But theologically, we should not imitate his blindness to creation.
We can admire his sheer endurance without adopting his inability to consider the lilies.
Speaking of endurance, let's talk about how he actually survived out there.
Section 6 of our notes calls it the pleasing pain of discipline.
That phrase, pleasing pain, really stuck out to me in the reading.
It is an oxymoron that perfectly describes the Christian life.
It is the insatiable thirst for holiness.
It hurts because you are never fully satisfied in this life.
But it is a good hurt because it continuously drives you to God.
His discipline was intense. He spent entire days in prayer.
He talks about wrestling with God until he wanted to sit up all night despite being completely exhausted.
Then the fasting.
This man was dying of consumption. He had almost no food to begin with.
And yet he would set aside days for fasting.
He fasted for guidance. He fasted for holiness.
On his 25th birthday, instead of celebrating, he spent the entire day in the woods.
Pouring out complaints to God about his own barrenness and lack of fruit.
And he wrote. He wrote constantly.
By candlelight until his bodily strength literally failed.
Why was the writing so critical to him?
It was not just record-keeping for posterity. Writing was a spiritual discipline for him.
It brought clarity to his mind and intensity to his affections.
He wrote to keep his soul from shriveling up in that extreme isolation.
If he had not written, he might have lost his mind completely.
He also sacrificed comfort at every single turn.
We mentioned he refused the easy path earlier,
He was actually offered a pastorate at East Hampton on Long Island.
which was a wealthy, very pleasant town,
It would have been the perfect escape from the cold and the pain.
but he turned it down flat.
He said he could have no freedom in the thought of any other business than the conversion of the heathen.
He deliberately chose the wigwam over the manor house.
And for a long time, that choice seemed to yield absolutely zero results.
He labored for years with almost no fruit to show for it.
He even struggled to love the people he was serving.
That is another incredibly honest admission in his journals.
He admits there were days he felt no desires for the Indians and dreaded preaching to them.
He did not always feel a supernatural overflow of love.
But he obeyed anyway.
And then, at Cross Week Sung in New Jersey, the dam finally broke.
It really did. After years of that paddle in the water feeling, suddenly the wind of the Spirit blew.
In 1 year, From 1745 to 1746, he saw an absolute explosion of grace.
130 persons joined the Assembly of Believers.
They even moved to Cranberry, New Jersey to build a self-sustaining Christian village.
It was a genuine historic revival.
And it happened just as Brainerd's body was finally giving out.
It is as if he was a candle that flared up brilliantly right before it was extinguished forever.
Let's move to the end. Section 7.
He's dying.
He travels to Jonathan Edwards' house in Northampton in 1747.
He is only 29 years old.
The tuberculosis has completely destroyed his lungs.
The final weeks were sheer agony.
He describes an uncommon kind of hiccough that was basically strangling him.
He had distress in his chest that he called insupportable.
And there is a tragic yet beautiful figure in the background of this final scene. Jerusha Edwards.
Jonathan Edwards' 17-year-old daughter.
She nursed Brainerd for those final 19 weeks.
There is a lot of historical speculation that they were in love, or at least deeply attached to each other.
But the cost of her care was staggeringly high.
Incredibly high. Jerusha contracted tuberculosis from Brainerd.
She died just 4 months after him.
She was only 18.
And yet, Jonathan Edwards, the father who lost his teenage daughter because of this, calls Brainerd's presence a gracious dispensation of providence.
That shows the sheer depth of Edwards' theology.
He believed that having Brainerd in his home, see him and I so well, so full of faith, was worth the terrible cost.
He saw the big picture of God's glory.
And that leads us to the ripple effect.
Because Brainerd died. He was buried.
That really should have been the end of it.
But Edwards did something that changed history.
He published Brainerd's diaries.
The Life of Brainerd, published in 1749.
It has never been out of print.
Think about that for a second.
A diary of a depressed, sick missionary who worked for a mere 4 years became a bestseller.
And look at who read it.
John Wesley said, "Let every preacher read carefully over the life of David Brainerd."
Henry Martyn, the great missionary to India and Persia, read it and resolved to imitate him.
William Carey, the father of modern missions, regarded the book as holy.
And in the 20th century, Jim Elliot.
Before he went to Ecuador and was martyred by the Auca Indians, he read Brainerd.
He looked at that life of sacrifice and said, "Lord, let me burn out for you like that."
This is the hidden smile referenced in our source title.
God frowned on Brainerd's physical life. He gave him pain, sickness, failure at Yale.
But behind that frowning providence, God was hiding a smiling face.
He used that broken, weak vessel to launch a movement that saved millions.
It brings up a provocative question about the value of a single human soul.
Piper argues that even if Brainerd only saved a few hundred Indians, it was worth all the hardship.
It is the mathematics of eternity.
If you believe in the reality of hell, the weeping and gnashing of teeth,
And the reality of eternal joy with Christ.
then any amount of temporal suffering is a price worth paying for one soul.
Brainerd believed that.
He lived it out to his last breath.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we have to look at ourselves. You, listening right now.
We live in an age of unbelievable comfort.
We have antibiotics, we have climate control, we have endless entertainment.
And Brainerd viewed his life as a heavenly journey he dared not loiter on.
He was terrified of wasting time.
That is the challenge I want to leave with you, the listener.
Are we loitering?
We're comfortable, sure, but are we walking with a purpose?
Brainerd's life asks us a very pointed question. Would you trade a long, comfortable, safe life for a short one that leaves a ripple effect for centuries?
Would you be willing to be a failure in the eyes of the world, like a student expelled from Yale, if it meant you were a hero in the kingdom of heaven?
It is a question that makes you uncomfortable, but in the best possible way.
David Brainerd, the man who struggled for every single breath, breathes a challenge into us 300 years later.
He certainly does. And the challenge is simply this. Make your life count for the glory of God.
Amen to that.
Thank you for joining us on Reformed Thinking. We hope this deep dive moves you not just to think, but to act.
Until next time.